Hi, and welcome to Legally Insane News. I'm your host, Kyle O'Donnell. Find and follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Kyle O'Donnell, and head over to legallyinsanefilms.com to listen to my other podcasts, to read my books and articles, to check out my photos from around the world, and to watch my documentary films. Again, that's legallyinsanefilms.com. In another story that I'm insanely proud to report on, 2 women gun owners have not once this week but twice saved the lives of plenty of people by shooting and killing deranged assailants who clearly intended to unveil carnage. You probably won't hear about these stories in the anti-Second Amendment media channels, however, but you will hear it here where we actually have the balls to defy the woke zombie hordes. 2 women made waves this week with their heroism in the face of violent threats. I'll break these 2 stories down individually. The first is in a case in, I believe it was West Virginia. I got my notes down here. I'll go through it. In a case that's just as important to those hoping for more gun control as those who support deregulating gun sales in America, a hero is likely to go unsung in the headlines around the country. This particular hero was a woman who chose to go unnamed in the news coverage of the event, where she saved countless lives before a shooter could even injure a single bystander. But they got a few shots off. It all happened at a graduation party in Charleston, West Virginia. See, I was pretty close. When a man named Dennis Butler reportedly appeared with an AR-15 style rifle and started firing into the crowd, which included students and their families. The unnamed woman, who was lawfully carrying her pistol at the time, fired on Butler before he was able to injure anyone at the event. Butler got off plenty of rounds. None of the rounds that either of the weapon-toting persons at the scene connected with any of their well, okay, how do I say this? The AR-15 did not make contact with any people, and the lawful gun owner at the time, I believe all of her shots impacted their intended target, and he was killed at the scene. According to police who responded to the scene, Butler had not only been stopped in the area for speeding and had been given a warning that children lived in the apartment complex where this all took place, he also reportedly had, quote, an extensive criminal history. Just looking at the list of news publications that cover the story, all that can be found in my initial search were Fox News, Breitbart, Yahoo News, USA News, The Blaze, USA Today, and the Police Tribune. These were the major outlets. Everything else, well, I guess we could call the Police Tribune a major outlet. Everything else included local stations and like independent publications and blogs that had non-syndicated digital rags, basically. And of those major media outlets, all of them happen to be right-leaning publications that support and report on lawful gun ownership. Nowhere to be found, however, were reports of this story on NPR, CNN, Grist, The Intercept, 538, Vox, Novara, HuffPost, The New York Times, not even the AP. There were so many publications that refused to cover this story on the left side of the mass media divide that I will suffice it to say the pattern is clear. No one wants to know that guns save lives on the left. They don't want to know it. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want anybody else to know it or talk about it. This is the pattern. And the pattern is the same as the message, and that is that lawful gun owners in this country stop deaths and violent crimes. It's happened to me twice. On 2 occasions in my life, I had a handgun at my access. I think both of the times it was on me. I was carrying. I pulled it once. I've never fired my weapon. I've never shot it at a suspect or someone coming at me. But once I saved my own life. Or I at the very least saved myself from a beating from 3 black males that had gotten out of a car. They were teenagers. I was very young. I had just gotten out of the Navy. I was in Texas. They were rolling around. They came up on me and a friend of mine. My friend ran one way. I ran the other. I was chased. I stopped a confrontation with my pistol. I have no idea how far it would have gone, but I told that dude to back off, and he sure as hell did. The second time, I actually saved a car full of people. I don't want to go into that one because I might actually do a podcast episode on that later. And there was also a third time where I had just a night before this happened, I had lost someone broke into my car, due to one of the United States Commonwealth states, won't name which one, one of the two. They had laws against going into bars with guns. And because of that law, I had my gun stolen from me. Someone broke into my car. They stole my pistol, which was in the glove box. And then the very next night, I was jumped by two guys that put me in the hospital and broke the orb over my right eye. And they had just got done. By the time they got to me, they had just got done jumping and kicking the crap out of a priest on his way home and stole his wallet. They eventually got these guys and put them in jail. But I kicked the crap out of one of them. Maybe I should do a podcast about this. I'll give you the quick story on that. I actually reached in my glove box, and which is what I just have a habit of reaching in there, and then I realized, oh crap, it's gone. And I reached down below, and there was this big jar, what do you call it? A bottle of tea. Before, this was back in, I think, early 2000s, probably like 2002, maybe 2001. I had an Arizona tea, a big bottle of Arizona tea in the baseboards. It was empty. I had finished drinking it, and I put it down on the the footboard. I grabbed it and I came back. The black, there were two guys. One was white, one was black. He came at me, hit me right in the face when I had opened my door. I was getting back into my car and opened my door. Sat down in the car, and he was right on top of me, hit me in the face. On the same motion, I reached down to grab the bottle and I smashed it over his head. I didn't realize at the time, because he and I went back and forth boxing. This guy must have been on crack or meth or something, because I'm a big dude and I was pounding this kid, and he just never went down. His buddy got behind me and choked me out, and they kicked the crap out of me while I was knocked out on the ground. But when they arrested the two guys, the black guy who I had sliced up, they told me that he has a permanent second smile. They said that he has what looks like a second smile, like the Joker, but like underneath his chin. Like it goes from one side of his face to the other, but underneath and across his chin, where his chin meets his neck. I almost cut the dude to death in one fell swoop. But had I had my service weapon, my concealed and carry pistol, and had I been able to exercise my constitutional gun rights, I would not have lost the pistol, and I would have had not had to go to the hospital that night. I probably barely made it. I don't know what they did after me by the time I passed out, but that's my personal story about that. So I'm forever going to be a fan of the laws that allow us to legally carry under various circumstances. But that's what the left media doesn't want you to hear. That's what they don't want you to know. They would be perfectly happy. Like, they would be not impacted in any way had I died all those many years ago. And if you want another example of this, I'll give you one. A second story this week of a woman refusing to become either a statistic of violent crime or another victim left behind in the leftist media agenda to keep America ignorant of circumstances where guns save lives. ABC Action News reported on this story, surprisingly, that a home invader was shot and killed. In that report, they did not name anybody's race, but it happened in a neighborhood in Clearwater, Florida, that I'll go into. That'll probably become apparent. A Clearwater, Florida woman woke up in the middle of the night to find that her 26-year-old neighbor, Justin Wright, had broken into her bedroom. She claims that Wright had broken into her house and began attacking her in her sleep by the time she retrieved a legally owned firearm and shot him.
Details tonight on a shooting that left a man dead. Clearwater police say it all started on a home invasion.
A resident at that location had reported that a gentleman had unlawfully entered the residence, and a struggle and attack ensued. She was able to reach out and call 911 during this attack, but the attack persisted, at which time she was able to retrieve a gun that she had lawfully purchased, and she used that gun to defend herself and fired one shot, which resulted in the death of the intruder.
For the full audio of that Q&A session with the police chief investigating the shooting, stay on after my outro, and I'll include that on the podcast. Obviously, the emotional state of the victim in the case was of concern. It was asked about several times, both by reporters at the Q&A with the chief presiding over the case, as well as on the scene when nearby residents were interviewed for the news report, the broadcast. But oddly enough, I don't recall ever hearing news reporters asking about the emotional state of men who have had to shoot shoot intruders in their homes for protecting themselves and their families, but maybe that's a flop, right? maybe that has nothing whatsoever to do with the social expectations between men and women. The men's part, of course, being emotionless soldiers in times like these. And, not to go too far on a tangent on this, but I'm curious if women are finding that they're slightly offended at the notion that they're expected to be, frail and soft and, and that it's a complete shock when they kill a home invader, right? That, or I wonder if they're at all shocked that the reverse expectation is true of men who undergo the exact same scenario. Why are women treated like weak little frail things? I mean, two strong gun-owning women stood up and saved the lives of countless people. And it always comes down to, not always, I shouldn't say always, but it has come down to their emotional state. How are you? Can we do something? Shouldn't it be important to ask that of men? I don't know. I'm just thinking in journalistic terms, how I would report this. But I'll just leave it at this. It's food for thought, but I think we should be applauding the efforts of all of those who defend themselves and their neighbors and their loved ones and people attending graduation ceremonies and stuff, and caring for the stability of everyone in the aftermath of such situations equally. I'll leave it at that. Call me crazy. I guess it's just something I've noticed. I hope you notice these sorts of things too. If you listen to this show and then you go off and you listen to major mainstream media, I just hope that you become very critical media consumers and think for yourselves rather than letting mass media at large create a process of thought for you. Quit contributing to the social isms. Women are not weak. They're strong. They're tough. They're badasses. They clearly have what it takes to take care of business. So stop treating them like princesses and start treating them like the queens that they are. That's my opinion on the matter. Also, you may find another thing interesting about that Q&A with the chief that I'm kind of stitching into the end of this podcast here. I've never heard the chief mention the race of the suspect.
We responded to 1639 Flagler Drive with regard to a shooting that had just occurred. A resident at that location had reported that a gentleman had unlawfully entered the residence.
And this is what I was kind of alluding to earlier as far as balanced journalism goes. What's even more surprising, no one, not a single person from the reporters pool asked that question either. Stay on after the podcast is done and listen to the whole Q&A. There are no questions of the man's description at all. They didn't ask how tall he was, if he was a small man who wasn't able to maybe handle himself in the scuffle, and that would have had an impact on any injuries that the woman might have sustained. They didn't ask about if he was a large man, and therefore perhaps more questions might have surfaced about any serious injury to the woman. Even though the perpetrator has a criminal history in other states, as confirmed by the police chief in the middle of that talk, not a single news outlet put his mugshot on any of the news reports that I could find. I have no confirmation that the assailant was black, but one thing that you'll benefit from knowing about the video taken from the neighborhood by the news agency that broadcasted it, every single resident in the area that was recorded for the report happened to have been black, right? It's nobody's prerogative that black folks commit crime, right? Nobody wants black folks to commit crime, but when we're whitewashing it and we're stepping right over it in the news media, to the point that it's keeping us from even asking about a description of the assailant so that we could find out more information about what potentially happened to the woman or what maybe his motivations were, right? It was mentioned that she was a new resident and the neighbor might have just been watching her go in and saw that she was a single female, and yet no mention of no requests for information on the man's description. Is that just an understanding now? Am I missing it? Is it just an understanding between the police chief who's given the Q&A and the reporters? We just stay away from those questions? Those of you who have heard my reports in the past know that I'm not trying to spark any kind of anti-race sentiment in these stories, but rather an ethical journalism debate. Ask yourselves the following question. When the public is forced to do their own research, including filing public records requests to find out the details that affect them in their communities and in their areas, where history has proven that the vast majority simply won't make that effort and they'll stay ignorant. Is it journalism truly doing their jobs? Has the journalist that you're watching on TV or reading in the news or listening to on a podcast really done their job if they're not reporting on the full story? And if not, if the answer to these questions is no, why have we started reporting stories that only report facts that support the woke narrative? That's the very next question that should follow in there. And that is the end of my soapbox for the ethical journalism debate. I'll just let it be known that I'm extremely proud of these two mystery women that stood up and shot their assailants to protect themselves while exercising their Second Amendment right, while keeping other people alive. To go and every single person has this woman at the graduation party to thank for the rest of their lives. They should both be applauded no matter their race and technically also no matter their gender. But I'd still like to see more cases where women like these two show the country why private gun ownership is still important. And you know what? Since I'm already celebrating great women doing good things in the world, why not celebrate the valiant efforts of yet one more? This time, a Latina swimming coach from Team USA dove in to rescue a female artistic swimmer by the name of Anita Alvarez, who fainted in the last half of her performance and sank to the bottom of the pool in front of a live viewing audience.
An American artistic swimmer was dramatically saved by her coach after she lost consciousness and sank to the bottom of the pool during an international competition. According to the Olympics website, 25-year-old Anita Alvarez had just finished her performance in the women's solo free routine at the International Swimming Federation's World Aquatic Championships in Budapest, Hungary on Wednesday when she began to sink. Her coach, Andrea Fuentes, immediately jumped into the water fully clothed to save her. In photos of the dramatic moment, the 39-year-old retired Olympian is seen swimming to Alvarez in order to bring her to the surface of the pool. There, she was joined by another swimmer who helped complete the rescue. According to the Olympics site, Fuentes told the Marca newspaper that she jumped in because she saw no one else, including the lifeguard, dive in. The coach added that she got a little scared because Alvarez wasn't breathing, but now she's fine.
According to a statement by her coach, this was not the first time that the two-time Olympian had to be rescued from fainting in the water. The last time actually took place at the Olympic qualifying events in Spain. Probably the most compelling part of the story, however, is the photos that emerge. Just looking at them, they're both heartbreaking and sobering at the same time. You're basically looking, for those of you who go to the article, I'll post those, but you get a real visage. You're basically looking at a woman who looks like she's died, but in the stillness and the buoyancy of the water, the true lifeless form of the human body can be seen in all its glory. I mean, it's trippy to see this. I mean, it looks like it's straight out of a movie. Again, I'll link those photos here as well. I'll put in an interview with the man who took them. Very interesting story there. Also, just an FYI, this story was plastered all over NPR and HuffPost, whose coverage of female heroes and even trans swimmers is quite present on the web. Okay, before I get into that soapbox, I'll just point out that this is clearly not balanced journalism at work. But that's it for This Week in Guns. Be sure to let me know what you think about this new segment by finding my contact details in the show notes. And also be sure to keep listening after the outro that's coming right up to hear Police Chief Slaughter's Q&A with the reporters about that harrowing story of a female gun owner who ridded the world of another scumbag who had no business breathing your air. For the final episode of a series I've done on guns in the news recently, I'll be discussing the renewed headlines of a former Grand Rapids police officer named Christopher Schur, who's been charged in the execution-style killing of a Congolese refugee named Patrick Luyoya. Tragic story there, but we may just see some justice. Stay tuned for that one. That's it for this edition of Legally Insane News. Make sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Kyle O'Donnell for updates and extras on this and other stories. If you're listening to this podcast at legallyinsanefilms.com or the Small Town Justice page, be sure to also download the Spreaker app, where you can directly subscribe and help me bump up my download totals. If you like this episode of Legally Insane News, consider becoming a supporting member. For just $3, you can get access to members-only unreleased articles and podcasts, case files on our latest investigations, updates for events and conventions that we're attending, and discounts on swag. To do that, just head over to patreon.com/legally-insane-films. There are 3 different memberships, each with more content than the one before. This is where I release all of my documentary films with outtakes and extras, as well as another podcast called Small Town Justice. You can check those out by going to legallyinsanefilms.com and clicking Join the Fan Club. Send any questions, comments, feedback, and show ideas to thejusticepod@gmail.com. This has been a production of Legally Insane Films, LLC. I'm your host, Kyle O'Donnell. We'll see you next time.